So let's have a little watch and a listen to what was played out, not just at Glastonbury to many thousands of people, but also on the live stream at the BBC to many hundreds of thousands more. Take a watch and a listen.
Death, death to the IDF, 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 death, death to the IDF. Hell yeah, from the river to the sea, Palestine must be, will be, inshallah, it will be free.
I mean, all credit for the poetry, you know, and the rhyme. But should he, Bobby Vylan, as his stage name is, should he face criminal charges for that? Should the BBC, whoever it is who made the decision to allow that to be live streamed, and once that chant has started, did not go click, let's switch to another stage, which is easily what could have been done, should that person or the BBC themselves place charges?
So I draw the line at the point of criminal charges, and I broadly believe that the bar for being jailed, the bar for being hauled before court for something you say is very, very, very high indeed. And I think it is threatening imminent violence. It's the Brandenburg test in America, it's called. And to me, what Lucy Connolly did last summer, what this man did yesterday, neither of those two sets of expressions rise to the level where I want someone criminalising. Do I think it should be broadcast? No. Am I quite delighted that he's already been banned from entering the United States of America?
That's hilarious. I tweeted this so soon after someone's going, well, you can do what you want. Yeah, you can. But I bet you anything his US tour is over.
I think both of those, you know, fantastic.
But that's, wait a minute, that's censorship, isn't it? That's you're supposed to be against that.
I think there is a room for editorial taste, and I draw editorial taste that I don't think people should be making vile, nasty, grotesque invitations for people to kill or wishing death upon other people. I don't think people should be able to go on the BBC and say, as they did many times in the years up, they were wishing for the death of Margaret Thatcher, for example. Yeah. I thought that was wrong. Do I think they committed a crime? No, I don't. And
it's a matter of taste rather than
yeah, one of the difficulties of being a person like me that tries to be principled and have a set series of values is
whether you agree with what someone's saying.
Whether I agree with or not is when I see a disgusting, frankly cowardly man like Bobby Vylan.
Oh yeah, he was the big I am on stage.
Do you know what? Yeah. Do you know what? You think you're brave because you went to a bunch of lefty middle-class kids who know absolutely nothing about this region,
waving their flags,
nothing about anything, and shouted something you knew they were going to agree with. You think that's brave? Let me tell you who's brave. I'll tell you who's brave. The solitary person who went there and flew the flag of the Nova Festival, went into a horde, a sea of people, none of whom agreed with them. And they said, do you know what? Who we should remember? We should remember the 378 boys and girls, and they frankly were boys and girls, that were killed at the Nova Music Festival, a festival just like Glastonbury. Yeah. We should remember the 44 hostages that were kidnapped, and the 10 of whom are still there more than 500 days later. I want to remember them. I want to say that they're just like us coming to a music festival. Yeah. That's bravery. What is not brave is to go up and play to a crowd and to go and, oh, I'm going to push the envelope a little bit further by calling for some people to be killed. Do you know what, Bobby Vylan? You wouldn't last 5 minutes with the average IDF soldier.
I was going to say,
would eat you for breakfast,
this is my thing,
mate.
is actually, you know, what's really brave is a conscripted 18 or 19-year-old young man or woman in Israel defending their nation, defending their families from the threat of annihilation from Hamas, from Hezbollah, from Iran, going into Gaza. Yes, it's a war. It's awful. Yeah, well, yeah, and awful things have happened when British soldiers have been at war as well. War is a terrible, terrible thing. That's why you don't start them by massacring people gratuitously in a bid to start a war, which is exactly what Hamas wanted to do. And they are winning the propaganda war, certainly with those young people, those, I mean, frankly, idiots who were there. I've got, you know, close family members who were at the at Glastonbury who said they found it extraordinarily intimidating how sort of, well, it's not pro-Palestine, it's anti-Israel, and it's anti-Jewish. We've got to call it what it is. This is the latest fashionable thing. It was climate, climate's a bit boring now. Now this is a bit more edgy, and these guys just think they are so being clever. I mean, here's something else. This is the wonderful thing I thought was wonderful. This guy, Bobby Vylan, we're going to keep calling him that. His name's Pascal Double Barrel. So not only did he shout "death, death" to the IDF, but another song he sang. I say sang. God, I sound like an 85-year-old judge, don't I? But he goes, I'll have to change some of the words. Obviously, heard you want your country back. Shut the F up. You can't have your country back. Now, compare and contrast, will you, his view towards Britain and people wanting their country back and, Palestinians wanting what they believe Palestine. It's never been a state of Palestine, but think Gaza back. Well, you had Gaza back, but then you chose to let Hamas be in charge of it, and that's when it all went wrong. I mean, it's fascinating, these people. They think that borders don't exist and that we should absolutely just accept any entrant from anywhere around the world. Well, but not in the Middle East, where Jews really shouldn't be in certain places because of, national borders by them. And they don't believe in the nation state, except when it's a nation state for Palestine. The confusion, these are muddleheads. They shouldn't be listened to. Where I stand in particular on this is, I'm with you. Here's my thing. If you're going to prosecute Lucy Connolly for her tweet over Southport riots, then you have to prosecute both Kneecap for things they've done and said in the past, although we're told that they are not going to be prosecuted for certain very blatant alleged crimes, but they're not going to be prosecuted because of the time delay. I'm not really sure why that should make a difference. But you have to prosecute Bob Vylan. You simply have to, because if you're going to say one is a crime and the other isn't, then you have two-tier justice. But we already know that. Now the question is, will he likely? I'm going to guess that police they'll interview, they'll go through the motions, but they'll all try and quietly drop it. And I think we should make sure it's not quietly dropped. I really do. I love the fact that this guy thinks he's the big I am, and I'm now famous, and look at me. Yeah, and then your 12-night US tour out the window, mate, because they're not so keen on people with those sort of views coming to their country, and your visa's going to be revoked. Should have thought of that first, when you're eating your vegan ice cream at a dairy farm. Let that go. I mean, these people, as I said, these people are muddleheads. But also, crucially, you're in this bizarre situation with the BBC where they have been warned in advance. They know what Kneecap's views are. There's no way in the world they didn't know what Bob Vylan's views were. They've been very blatant and open about it. Most basic due diligence about what's going out on air. We know that they had the warning from the Prime Minister. This guy, it was a Kneecap. Those three, they shouldn't have been on stage at Glastonbury. At the very least, they shouldn't be broadcast by the BBC. They went ahead with it. They went ahead with a warm-up act in Bob Vylan, who was even more extreme, And that chant, as we just heard, he didn't just say it once and he didn't have a chance to press the button. We've had some senior figures, Danny Cohen, former head of BBC Television, and even someone who used to run Channel 4, who's completely sort of on side with all the lefty views. Even she said, no, you can press the button. There's no way when you've got a live feed of a concert that you wouldn't have another live feed to go to at another stage, which they did. They were being live streamed at the same time. You would literally go, ping, the foot, death to the IDF, ping. Go straight to another feed. That's what you would do. And they made a choice not to do that. That's an editorial judgment. And that editorial judgment was horribly, horribly, horribly wrong. And someone needs to be pulled up for that. And this is the thing. If GB News, if Talk TV, Talk Radio, if we had done something similar, if I had a caller on who said stuff like that, say death to Pakistani army or something like that, or equivalent, death to black people, death to Muslims, or something. By the way, though, my listeners wouldn't say that because they don't have those views. But if someone did say something like that on my channel or GB News, you think that we wouldn't get prosecuted because we've got what's called a dump button. We've got a button so you can press, so you've got a little bit of a delay. Why would you have Kneecap or Bob Vylan on air without a delay so you could press the dump button, so stop it and move live stream? And if it is live, you immediately cut it off. If I then put a caller or a guest back on after they said that, I would be in trouble, and quite rightly. There are rules for broadcasting. I think I think that people have a right to say, I'm going to watch some live streaming on the BBC, the channel I'm forced by law to pay for, of what used to be a fun music festival with a bit of light lefty politics thrown in, and not be subjected to, I mean, I don't like the phrase hate speech, but I think death. I think that's hate speech in the full meaning of the phrase. I think people have a right to not have to put up with it in the same way that I F am blind in my real life, but I don't want to, you know, my kid to hear the C word and the F word before 9 p.m. on telly. I think people have a right to expect a certain standard, and the BBC has fallen way below that standard. They knew this was likely to happen. They did not prepare for it. When it did happen, they did nothing. I think heads have to roll. Now, some have suggested that Tim Davie, the director of the BBC, is the head that has to roll. Now, having had conversations with a very, very, very senior figure at the BBC a week or so ago, and I talked to that BBC figure about, I thought that the BBC had a serious problem with institutionalised anti-Semitism. That senior figure at the BBC said absolutely not, how that's an outrageous thing for me to have said. It wasn't true, and I pointed out, it's so institutionalised in your organisation, you don't even see it yourselves. Well, here we go. Glastonbury and Bob Vylan and Kneecap are the proof. They don't even see it because those views are normalised at the BBC. Yeah. And meanwhile, you, me and everyone watching and listening right now is paying their wages. That is not acceptable anymore. That has got to stop. Heads have to roll.
Yeah, and you're right to draw the contrast between the kind of broadcasting that we do here and what they're doing. We, with a tiny but talented team at Talk TV, we are held to an exacting standard that if we ever slip, and the guys that sit in the gallery, in the room where they decide what is going out, if they hear the slightest thing, it gets dumped, as you say, and taken off air. The BBC
that's the rules.
Because those are the rules, and we signed up to play, and that's how you do it. Yeah. The BBC would have had dozens, if not hundreds of people making those decisions sat in there. And for them not to have noticed means that people at varying levels of seniority, some paid very large salaries, listened to that, processed it and thought absolutely nothing of it.
Not an issue, and that's the issue.
And that normalisation of the just whole class of staff at the BBC for whom all of this is normal. And that's where, for years and years, decades now, people have said there is a bias at the BBC that because of the kind of staff they hire, they just can't see. They did an audit 20 years ago. They asked what newspapers are people buying in. And surprise, surprise, there were 3 times as many people buying The Guardian as anything else.
There's more people reading The Guardian at the BBC than read The Guardian.
Yes. But this is it. And for as long as this culture continues to happen, it's going to carry on. So I don't actually want senior heads to roll. What I want is wholesale change in the kinds of staff so normal people go to work in the BBC.
Normal moral views.
Rather than it being the preserve of a North London elite.